Welcome back to Mystery Case X. Today we're continuing our strange case series with a mass shooting that happened in 2007 at Virginia Tech in the United States. After it happened, this case sparked waves of debate and pushed many changes and reforms in American society, especially around preventing mass violence in schools. In this episode, after I walk you through how the tragedy unfolded, I'll also talk about some of the psychological analysis connected to the killer. So let's get into today's case. At around 6:45 on the morning of Monday, April 16th, 2007, a young Korean man was seen near the entrance of West Ambler Johnston Hall. Inside that building were nearly 900 students. It is still unclear exactly how he got inside, but at around 7:15, his first victim was killed. A 19-year-old female student named Emily Hilscher. When Emily was shot, a nearby student, 22-year-old Ryan Clark, heard the noise and ran over. He was shot several times and died there as well. After that first attack, the young man left the scene and returned to his dorm room. There he changed clothes, turned on his computer, deleted data, and removed the hard drive. About an hour after the first shooting, which left 2 people dead, someone reportedly saw him throw a hard drive into a pond on campus. But later, investigators never found it, and to this day, no one knows what was on it. Nearly 2 hours after the first attack, he went to a post office and mailed a package to NBC News. Inside the package were writings, statements, and videos he had recorded himself. After that, he left carrying a backpack. Inside it, he had prepared chains locks, a hammer, a knife, 2 guns, 19 magazines, and nearly 400 rounds of ammunition. He made his way to Norris Hall. When he entered the building, he used chains to lock the doors shut. At each entrance, he also placed a warning that bombs would go off if anyone tried to open the doors. Then he began moving through the building, going from the lower level upward, shooting anyone he encountered. Survivors later said that at first, when he looked into a classroom and glanced around several times, some students thought he was a new student who was lost or looking for the right room. No one imagined he was the killer. He entered room 206 and shot the professor who was teaching there. Then he fired at the students sitting in the classroom. After that, he moved to room 207 next door, where a German class of about 10 people was taking place, and opened fire there too. He continued moving through other rooms, including 211 and 204, reloading and shooting as he went. The entire massacre lasted about 10 to 12 minutes. Police arrived quickly, but it took them nearly 5 minutes to reach the area where he was because the doors had been chained shut. Before officers could get inside, he killed himself by shooting himself in the head. Police found him dead in room 211, surrounded by bodies. Inside his backpack, he still had 203 rounds of ammunition left. That means if he had not killed himself or been stopped, the number of victims could have been even higher. In total, the massacre killed 32 victims, including 5 faculty members and 27 students. If the killer's suicide is included, the death toll was 33. Another 17 people were shot, and others were injured while trying to escape. So who was the killer and what drove him to commit something so brutal? The killer was Cho Seung-hui, a 23-year-old South Korean citizen who was studying for his bachelor's degree at Virginia Tech. From a young age, Cho was described as strange. He was isolated, quiet, and did not like communicating with other people. He moved to the United States with his family when he was 8 years old. In elementary school, he was often teased by classmates and people around him. His grades were not terrible, but because he was so withdrawn, so silent, and behaved differently from others, he became an easy target. By middle school and high school, it went beyond teasing. Some classmates bullied him. People who knew him when he was younger said students mocked him because he looked like a zombie, like a lifeless body, always low energy, gloomy, and unwilling to talk to anyone. When teachers asked him questions in class, he almost never answered. Written tests were not a problem for him, but if he was called on to speak out loud, he rarely raised his hand or spoke clearly. Sometimes teachers had to threaten to hold him back if he refused to answer. Only then would he force out a few words barely audible, as if he were speaking just to get it over with. His disturbing behavior became more obvious in college. Some teachers noticed that he was an unusual student and seemed to have psychological problems. One instructor reportedly noticed deeply concerning behavior. Cho would intentionally drop objects, then use his phone to take pictures upward from below female students. That behavior made many people feel unsafe. People also noticed that he had a very negative view of the world around him. In a writing assignment for his English major, he created characters who were always aggressive, violent, and often carrying weapons. Sometimes the characters carried hammers. Sometimes they killed with chainsaws. In one story, he wrote about a main character who discovers a teacher sexually abusing female students, then kills that teacher. What made this even more disturbing was that, in real life, Cho himself had been accused of watching and secretly photographing female students. Yet, in his fiction, the sexual predator became the teacher, while the main character became the punisher. To some people, that suggested a twisted inner world filled with hatred, distortion, and heavy blame toward others. In one student playwriting contest, teachers also found his work deeply abnormal. His script was about a 13-year-old boy who constantly behaved in crude, vulgar ways and even killed his own father. People who read his writing said it was full of spelling errors, but what stood out even more was the tone. It felt like something pulled out of a nightmare, dark, violent, and disturbing. There were also times when Cho sent messages to his roommate mentioning suicidal thoughts. The roommate reported it to the police. Officers intervened to stop a possible suicide attempt, and Cho was taken for a psychological evaluation. But for reasons that are still difficult to understand, possibly because the seriousness of his condition was not fully assessed, he was not kept in a psychiatric hospital. He was released and told to seek treatment on his own. To many criminologists and psychiatrists, Cho Seung-sui showed traits often discussed in connection with mass killers. Statistically, people who carry out mass killings often share certain patterns. Most are male, although female offenders do exist. They often have no close friends, were bullied when they were young, tend to blame others, avoid taking responsibility for themselves, and quietly nurture revenge fantasies over time. With Cho, it is clear that he had been teased, bullied, and had long seen himself as someone abused and wronged. Over the years, that resentment hardened inside him. The massacre he carried out at the university, killing 32 victims, became one of the deadliest school shootings in American history at the time. As mentioned earlier, between the first killings and the second stage of the massacre, Cho sent a package to NBC. Inside were a CD, self-recorded videos, written declarations, and 43 photographs. Some photos showed him holding guns dressed almost like a warrior. In another, he held a hammer. others showed him posing in threatening ways. The package arrived at NBC's headquarters in New York on Wednesday, April 18th, after the massacre had already happened. In the videos, he spoke in broken, disconnected statements. He said things like, "Wasn't your Mercedes enough? Weren't your gold necklaces enough? Weren't your trust funds enough? Wasn't your vodka and cognac enough?" He seemed to be speaking about the lives of people he saw as rich, indulgent, and selfish. The statements did not flow clearly, but anyone watching could sense how unstable his mind was. He said others had broken his heart, violated his soul, and burned his conscience. He said they thought this was just the life of a poor little boy they had extinguished. He said he died like Jesus Christ to inspire the weak and defenseless. He said he did it not for himself, but for his children, his brothers, and his sisters. These words showed a deep level of delusion. He saw himself as someone bullied by the entire world, then gave his murder some kind of grand meaning, as if he were standing up to liberate others from oppression. Like many people who have carried out school massacres, Cho had prepared for his crime in advance. He planned, bought guns, prepared messages, and recorded videos as a kind of final statement. In those videos, he even referred to the perpetrators of previous massacres as martyrs turning murder into something twisted and almost sacred in his distorted worldview. In particular, several of the photographs he sent looked similar to scenes from the South Korean film Old Boy, which won an award at the Cannes Film Festival in 2004. The film centers on hatred and revenge. Its main character is a man who is suddenly kidnapped and imprisoned in a room for 15 years without knowing why. During his captivity, he has only a bed, a television, and food delivered to him each day. Through the television, he learns that his wife has been killed and that his daughter has been adopted by a family in Sweden. For those 15 years with nothing else to do, he trains, watches television, and builds a desire to find his enemy. When he is released, he begins searching for the person who imprisoned him and trying to understand why that person locked him away for 15 years instead of killing him. During that journey, the main character meets a young woman. They connect, help each other, and gradually develop feelings. She supports him as he searches for the truth. Eventually, he discovers that the person who imprisoned him was someone who had gone to the same school years earlier. The reason for the revenge goes back to the past when the main character accidentally saw that person having an incestuous relationship with his own sister. The story spread, and the sister later died by suicide. From that moment, the man carried hatred and spent years planning his revenge. The peak of the revenge comes when the main character discovers that the young woman he has fallen in love with is actually his biological daughter. His enemy had arranged for father and daughter to fall into an incestuous relationship without knowing who they were to each other. After completing his revenge, that enemy kills himself by shooting himself in the head. Some people believe Cho Seung-hui may have been influenced by some of the imagery and symbolism in that film, especially the poses with the hammer and gun and the suicide by a single bullet to the head. But the more important factor was still Cho's distorted mental state and his deliberate preparation. After the massacre, many analysts suggested that Cho Seung-hui showed signs of paranoid personality disorder, along with other signs of severe psychological instability. His earlier medical records had also noted mental health concerns. At the time, the tragedy sparked major debate in the United States over stricter gun control and how mental health records should be handled. In the U.S., a patient's medical information usually cannot be shared with any organization without the patient's consent. That means schools may not know whether a student entering campus has a serious history of psychological instability. After this tragedy, many people asked whether the school or relevant authorities might have been able to prevent some part of the massacre if they had known more about Cho's condition. It is an extremely complicated issue because it involves privacy, the right to education, mental health, and public safety. Before closing this case, I want to talk a little about some of the traits often associated with paranoid personality patterns. Just to give you another perspective, the first major trait is excessive suspicion. This is not the same as ordinary doubt when something truly seems unusual. A normal person becomes suspicious when there is a reason, when there is evidence. But someone with paranoid tendencies may distrust almost everything, everyone, and every action around them, even without clear proof. The second trait is difficulty forgiving and a tendency to hold grudges. If someone hurts them, they may carry that resentment for a very long time. The third trait is a constant suspicion that others are using them, harming them, or betraying them. In romantic relationships, they may repeatedly accuse a boyfriend or girlfriend of cheating, even when there is no evidence and no real sign of it. Another trait is that they anger easily and can shift from normal to furious very quickly, almost without warning. That kind of emotional loss of control becomes especially dangerous when paired with violent behavior. Another common trait is difficulty telling who is a friend and who is an enemy, because they do not truly trust anyone. When someone suspects everything, it becomes very hard to build friendships or long-term relationships. They also often do not want to confide in other people. The need to share is a normal human need. No matter how strong we are sometimes, we still want to talk, to open up to someone we trust. But people with severe paranoid tendencies may struggle to open up because they fear being used or fear that anything they say could later be turned against them. A final trait is a constant feeling of being threatened even when other people's actions are completely ordinary. For example, if someone notices something stuck in their hair and reaches out to brush it away, they may immediately react with anger, thinking that person is trying to hurt them. Or if someone hands them a glass of water, they may suspect something has been put inside it. They see ordinary actions through a lens of fear and hostility. What makes these conditions so difficult is that many people do not realize they have a problem. Because they are suspicious by nature, even when family members encourage them to see a doctor, they may think the doctor is trying to harm them. The medication is part of a plan, or everyone is conspiring against them. That makes treatment extremely difficult. Their lives often become closed off. They blame others, look at life through a negative lens, and may feel that they are doing something special even when reality says otherwise. These signs need to be taken seriously, not so we can stigmatize people with mental health struggles, but so we can understand that when someone shows long-term instability, especially with violent tendencies or threats toward others, they need timely support and intervention. And that is where we'll close today's case. Thank you for listening and staying with me through this story. We'll meet again in the next videos with more cases. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time.